Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Non-Obvious Beyond Diversity Summit 2021. I'm Ripa Rashid. I am your moderator and host for today's session entitled Shared Parenting, How the Pandemic Accelerated the Shift to Equal Care for Kids at Home. We have 3 star speakers on this topic with us today. If we can bring them on, that would be great. Allow me to introduce our 4 wonderful speakers. Welcome, everybody. I'm going to start with Leslie Ford. Leslie is the founder of Moms for the Moms Hierarchy. Welcome. Welcome.
Thank
We're going to
you.
hear a lot more. Mom's Hierarchy of Needs. Welcome. Then we have with us Emma Johnson, who is a blogger, a media personality, and author. And she is the founder of Wealthy Single Mommy, as well as a site called Moms for Shared Parenting. Welcome, Emma. And last but not least, Sergio Rosario Diaz. You are a blogger and you are founder of Soy Super Papa. For those of you who don't speak Spanish, that means I'm super dad. So welcome, Super Papa, Sergio. It's great to have you all with us. And this is such an important topic. It's been making all the headlines, and I can't imagine a better collection of people to have this conversation with. I'm going to start off with a question about the names under which you blog, write, and share your expertise. They're all super catchy and very distinctive in terms of where you position yourself in this conversation. So if I can start with you, Leslie, if we can talk about the name of yours, Mom's Hierarchy of Needs. I know it's inspired by Maslow's Hierarchy of Needs, but tell us more.
Absolutely. So it was just over 5 years ago now. I completely burned out when my second child was born. And, I was someone who never needed a lot of sleep. I always had tons of energy. And I was just kind of having a casual conversation with a dad about stress. He said, "Why are moms so stressed?" And I said, "Well, there's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and then there's mom's hierarchy of needs." And I just became really fascinated as a researcher with how other people would define that. And over the last 4.5 years, I've been studying and researching all of the reasons it's so hard to make space for self-care and professional growth after kids.
Well, we're going to hear a lot more about that, I think, when we go to some of our additional questions. But let me now turn to you, Sergio, if you want to tell us. Soy Super Papa. So how did you start with that name, and tell us what that's about?
Wow, it's been quite a journey. 5 years ago, my daughter was born 4 years ago, Stella. But 5 years ago, when I learned I was going to become a dad, I am a native Spanish speaker. I was born and raised in Puerto Rico. And when I went to look for information about parenting, there wasn't a lot of information in Spanish. And when it became to talk to the point of active parenting and fatherhood, there was even less. So I built this organization and model to provide information to those dads that are bilingual like myself, that might live in the US, but their primary language maybe is Spanish, or they reading Spanish. So what we do in Soy Super Papa is we foster a culture of active fatherhood and equity. And we connect fathers from all over the world, and we do connect them from the online community to the offline community. And we've been doing that for 5 years. And I have traveled the world as a husband to a U.S. Army officer and a father, and it's been quite a journey, and I'm loving it, and I am so happy to be connecting with you guys.
That's what a fantastic story, Sergio. I mean, and I love the kind of bilingual aspects of it. It's a fastest growing population in the United States is Spanish speaking. So let's come back to some of the cultural aspects of that. And then last but not least, this time around, Emma, over to you. I gotta say, I love all the titles that you use. So tell us.
There's a lot, but let's just okay. So just really very briefly, about 9 years ago, I started wealthysinglemommy.com as a blog, and it's grown into a large business media platform for single moms. And I believe it's the largest platform for single moms in the world. And one of the underlying themes, a couple of the underlying themes is getting away from this idea that of this old narrative about what it means to be a single mom, that we are the primary breadwinner essentially, and always with external visits to dads, but dads have visits, and that the best that we can do is financial dependence on men by way of child support or alimony. None of these systems have worked for the last 40, 50 years that we've had large numbers of single mothers and separated parents in this country. So trying to help women lead this movement forward as a positive new way for women, for gender equality, for children, and for dads. But more specifically, the title that I'd like to hone in on today, a couple of years ago, I started a site called momsforsharedparenting.org. And this is specifically around my activism about changing policy and culture for separated families, which are now 30 million families in the United States. The parents live separately from each other. This is a third of US kids. This is not a small minority of families. And this cuts across every single socioeconomic group in our country. And getting away from this idea that, again, that moms, women are primary caregivers and dads are primarily the breadwinners with visits to their children. And thankfully, there's a huge body of research that proves now, we know that is really the worst case scenario for the kids. Kids need both parents in equal measure. We need 50-50. And now we know, and the pandemic has only highlighted, that if we do not have 50-50 equality for childcare, whether the parents are married and living together in a heterosexual marriage or they are living separately, we need 50-50 childcare. And there was no research in this regard. And I started doing my own research, and I have found a direct correlation between childcare equity in separated families and women's earnings. So the more equality that single moms have in their childcare, the more money they earn. And this is a really powerful new movement that I'm hoping to disseminate across the world.
Wow, fantastic, Emma. I love you reshaping and myth busting around some of these very outmoded, outdated ideas about how families are constructed and operate in America. I mean, our new first families, I think, in the White House are going to be evidence of very different paradigms than the 1950s Leave It to Beaver model, right?
Thank you. Yep, I've been tweeting about that very thing today. Thank you.
Yep. So there you go. So let's talk about, perhaps the most overused adjective over the last year is unprecedented, but we are in unprecedented times, and we're in this new norm, the pandemic norm, the COVID reality. So let's get started talking a little bit about, from each of your perspectives, how you've seen the COVID reality reshape parenting norms in the household. I'd love to let's start with you, Emma, because I think your lens on the single parenting lens is a really kind of great place to start.
Well, it's the most extreme, because if you have two parents that are cohabiting, then you have two potential breadwinners. So when the economy is very unstable, maybe one person's career is challenged and the other person can at least be bringing in some money. When you have two households, even if the parents are actively involved in co-parenting in a healthy way, that's still two households you have to support. It's twice as expensive. So that's one challenge. The other challenge is, the reality is, the vast majority of separated families, the moms are the primary caregiver, with the dads almost checked out. I mean, in very large numbers. The survey of 2,300 single moms that I did, it showed that only 14% of single moms have their kids 50-50, and 51% of single moms have their kids 100% of the time. And I say that as a fact. It is not to shame men, because the reasons are very complicated. Men are very much marginalized as fathers in this country. It's a complicated issue we don't have time for today. But during the pandemic, these women, who are the sole breadwinners of their homes almost all of the time, now have to figure out how to work and or take care of their kids, because schools were closed. And then single moms are definitely disproportionately more at risk of losing their work, because they tend to be women of color and lower income women that are working in service professions that were at high risk of being laid off, and also high risk of getting COVID. So it was just sort of this perfect storm of horrible situations for single parents in this country. A bright side was that for parents that do have some, at least, foundation of a co-parenting relationship, it's a great opportunity for them to come together and really shine and figure these things out together. So all kinds of creative solutions for people saying, okay, I'm working and you're not, so let's figure this out. Like, kids can be at your house while I'm trying to bring in some money. Maybe somebody has a new partner, a step parent, or a relationship that could, I mean, people were really getting creative during dark times, and that's what happens during dark times. It brings out the best and the worst in people. So we were seeing a lot of that. But at the same time, this is very much highlighting, get back to my personal mission here, is just highlighting the need for great co-parenting and equal co-parenting for all parents.
Yeah.
And these separated families, there's a unique opportunity because it can be legislated. We can't legislate what happens inside of a marriage. People can gripe and moan about who does the dishes all day long, but nobody can come in and make somebody do their share of the dishes. But you can make somebody
Really?
take care of the kids.
Can't you mandate that, Emma, please?
I don't care. You're on your own. I'm a single lady. You work out your own married lady problems. You're on your own there. But the courts can come in and change the law, and we're working on changing the culture to normalize equally shared parenting that really will mandate this equality for tens of millions of families in the US. And it's a benefit to men and women and children and the economy and the family courts. There's only good things can come out of this.
Yeah. Before I move to what our other speakers, a quick question. Any good stories stand out in your mind about how things kind of shaped, a positive story about how things have changed within some of the families that you work with or hear from? Anything you want to share?
Well, I could just share my own personal story.
That would be
So
great.
my kid's dad and I live in the same neighborhood in New York City, and we, the kids would go back and forth. And I would love to say that we are a shining example of a perfect co-parenting family. We are not. We can be high conflict with each other for sure. But when COVID hit, you remember New York really was ground zero those early months, and it was so scary, and nobody knew anything about the disease, and it was just, it's still scary, but it was just so many unknowns. I think added another layer, and the schools were closed. And luckily, my boyfriend has a house in the mountains a couple hours away. And I said to my ex, I was like, look, I just want to take the kids and get out of here. It feels safer out in the country. And he was like, go for it, go for it. Just flee to safety. And it was just a very easy decision. And it was hard, all of that then did fall on me. I have a partner, a romantic partner, and we have a nice place out here. And it was the key, my kids really missed their dad. He really missed them. But I think we all just really got on the same page that felt like the safest thing to do. And I know I'm very grateful. He's expressed that he was really grateful. And I think we just did the best that we could in a tough situation.
That's a great story. So, really kind of people having to broker things that they wouldn't otherwise be able to do.
Right. But I have to say that would not have been possible if if it was a situation where I was like trying to get more custody or trying to get more money out of him. And he felt very like this was just me maneuvering a manipulative thing. I think we trusted each other enough to be able to be nimble in a tough situation without like the consequences of that being very dire for the future of our family. It was a tough thing for a short term, but you had to have that foundation of trust to make it work in the first place.
Great. So that actually brings us into a hierarchy of needs, right? The hierarchy of needs actually shape the decision making. So Leslie, I think we go to you next. Tell us just a reminder of the original question. How has COVID changed the shared parenting movement on the home front?
It's huge. and I'll paint the picture a little bit, which I think Emma has done well in many ways, but childcare was a mess before COVID, right? Working families were stitching together some complicated patchwork of, might be a sitter or a full-time nanny with some combination of school, after school care, maybe a grandparent thrown in there, perhaps some play dates with friends, a series of perhaps, after school activities or sports, but it was always messy. It was never reliable. And so suddenly with the pandemic, you take all of the support, even though it was fragile and imperfect, but all that support has been unavailable. So I have now, close to 1,500 parents who've taken part in my pandemic research since March. And it's only about 20% of parents that have not had their childcare or their on-site access to school disrupted. So the vast majority are trying to figure it out. And what it's forced, I think, inside of the home you have had, in many ways, as it's been described, right, this very gender divide around childcare and household. So that has always been a source of tension in mothers who are married to fathers, usually. But if there's a shared, if the parenting is not shared, to Emma's point, it puts a tremendous amount of strain on the other partner. So what I've seen in couples, overwhelmingly, couples are tense. They're feeling a lot of stress. Marriages are, dealing with a lot of resentment and difficulty around having to navigate these issues of shared childcare and shared parenting. But interestingly, it's not the majority, but it's not an insignificant minority. I have almost 30%, it's like 28% in my study, where of the married parents who've responded, who have grown closer together because they have found a way to collaborate more. Like some people have said, hey, my spouse used to travel Mondays through Fridays, or my spouse was really rarely around or in the office very late, but now my spouse is here. And especially if that partner is a dad, like my husband, I've seen comments, my husband never realized how much work it was to take care of a toddler and an infant until now. He's actively involved. I'm also seeing a huge rise in grandparent care. So a lot of people without childcare have moved in with their parents, either to support their aging parents or to get help with their children. So there is this contingent of people who are happier and feel more supported, but it's not the majority.
Yeah. And real kind of shifts, right, in certain cultures to have that multi-generational family piece. Any stories that strike you from your research in this period that you want to highlight for our audience?
Yeah, I think people are embracing and loving the intergenerational support if they've never had it before. Certainly in communities of color. And my parents are from Barbados. I grew up in both countries. So it's very prevalent and popular in immigrant communities as well. We're more likely to have intergenerational living. But for many families where that was not the norm, they're enjoying seeing these closer bonds between their parents and their children. They're enjoying having more hands to help with the housework, to help with just all of the kind of routine things that really happen operating a home. So, in the past, when we kind of exited, right, to go out to work, we were kind of hiding the fact that work was happening from our kids. We were hiding the fact that kids were happening from work. I mean, people knew we were parents, but it was kind of off in the background. But with it all blended together, it's forcing a lot of innovation. I think it's also creating this new level of transparency where people are having conversations about their children, with their partners, with their parents, anyone who they're cohabiting with, that they wouldn't have had before. And in many ways, that's healthy.
Yeah. I love what you point out in terms of innovation, right? It's a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. Where I think creating new norms, I work in the financial services industry where work from home blended models were a rarity. And this, overnight, the industry has transformed. So that's obviously a good thing. And some of the trends you mentioned around parents being around more, fantastic. So now over to you, Sergio. Would love to get your perspectives on this piece around how parenting's changed, and talk to us from the perspective of your blog, from the perspective of your own experience. What's changed during COVID in shared parenting?
Well, I got to say, Emma and Leslie are right on point. They have been, touching certain points where I have been through, and how do you redesign work and family, right? How do you become or find sustainable solutions for your particular situation? And in my case, I've been a stay-at-home dad for the past 2 years and a half. Stella is my daughter. I am a military husband, so my wife is a U.S. Army officer, and we decided that I was going to stay home just because of childcare in Washington D.C. was so expensive. Actually, childcare in Washington D.C. was $2,500 a month, right? And with that said, I had my job, but we said, wait, after taxes and all that, that's too much. And it didn't include lunch or snacks. So, it comes to a point where your reality might change, or you might have to change your reality. And, I am the head of a community that's all over the world, pretty much. That picture that you guys posted was in Spain with my good friend and admin, Juan Palomares, which I traveled to Spain, and both him and his family were behind us. So we traveled through Valencia, Spain, and we share, our experiences and got together. The same thing has happened in Costa Rica with other dads. And I think, as a leader of an active parenting community, we have lots of models within Soy Super Papa that we learn from. Um, I could say, believe it or not, Chile, Argentina, Spain, these communities, the active parenthood in those countries are actually a model. These people are actually years ahead of us. And now that when it comes to the pandemic and how we made our changes, or if it was intergenerational care. We recently had at my work at Third Path, we had a webinar where we had the grandparents join, and they were saying, why are the parents not relying on us? We are capable. We want to take care of the kids. It's just a matter of asking us. And there might be some other parents that don't have that need, but in the Latino community, which is the community I serve, it's something more common. And we've seen countries such as Mexico where they're very dependent on services. We've seen dads who, lost their jobs and they are reinventing themselves. We see a lot of parents in Spain, which they are on their third lockdown, trying to make ends meet and trying to shift. When mom is a healthcare provider and dad is working in a factory, how do they fix their schedules to be able to take care of their kids? So we've seen all sorts types of things, and I think the number one thing that we do in the community is provide support, provide resources. um, have speakers come in and have other people provide their model, so they can relate and they can say what works for you might not work for them, but they might find something in common that will be good for your household.
Yeah. Sergio, I want to drill down into one thing you said about some Latin American countries being ahead of us in terms of these gender roles and paradigms. So talk to us a little bit more about that. Why is that? Is it because of legal infrastructure? Is it something else going on?
Well, when we talk about Chile, Argentina, I
Yeah.
think their social model is a little bit more advanced in terms of maybe what the government has to offer, maybe of education.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but my experience was when I started, the community, that these dads, their thoughts, their models were way more advanced, and I started learning from their parenting and their active fatherhood. I think one of the things that is changing right now with my generation, the millennials, is the pride that we take and that we have ourselves in being parents. I think the model and the system each day is being broken down a little bit more, and dads are taking more responsibility,
Mm-hmm.
or they want to take more responsibilities. So that's why I created this community to provide support for those dads
Yeah.
that want to do something about it. And that you can see a quote there: fatherhood doesn't have a face. And that's something that I always carry with me. That's why my community, you don't see my face, you have like a little logo. And I feel like anybody, I always tell people, today is a good day to be a super dad. Any day, it's a decision that you take, and every day that we wake up, we have the choice to make the decision to be a great active father.
Well, thank you for doing all that you do to kind of evolve our paradigms to something that makes a lot more sense, I think, for all of us that are on this conversation today. I'm going to shift gears to the workplace. This is kind of my area, which I've been working on gender and equity in the workplace globally. And a couple of things, data points I want to showcase with you, which have been alarm bells, cautionary in the diversity and inclusion community. One, a McKinsey study, which sixth year of the study of women in the workplace in the United States, showed that 1 in 4 women, working women, are considering leaving the workforce or downsizing their jobs, potentially erasing gains made over the last 6 years. So that
I want to point out though, that was McKinsey's, that was from a pool of their clients. That wasn't from the US overall. So those are educated, high performing women that have a choice. They have a choice.
It's a select, they have a choice because if you're the primary breadwinner, that was going to be the flip side, is that we know that women are increasingly the primary breadwinners in their families. A TD Ameritrade poll last year found that over 50% of working women in America are primary breadwinners of their family. And actually, I've done research outside of the United States where we see that trend actually growing in Asia and Latin America as well. So this is not just an isolated Western thing happening. So what are the implications of the shared parenting work that you all do on equity, wage equity, all of the factors around economic equality for across gender? Who wants to take that one? We don't have to follow a particular order. Anyone want to go first?
Well,
I'm happy.
I would like to lead the conversation with my example. In my
Sure.
home, my wife is the primary breadwinner. She has a higher income. And when it comes to a conversation, it's not easy. I think a lot of support has to be provided. We provide a lot of numbers and data, but how do you support these men, right? All these stay-at-home dads who are taking care of their children while their wife is out working, and the support comes within a support group without the stigmas that you carry as a man staying home, all the name calling, all the decisions that are made that people question you. And I can say it's not easy. I am super proud to be taking care of my daughter at home. And now as I get back into the workforce, I notice how hard it is because I am still home taking care of my daughter and I am working. So I can only imagine how single moms, can do this, and especially with multiple kids and no other parent to be supportive. I think when we talk about this, it's about creating this network of support that we as men who stay home need. It's whether most men will tell you, I don't need it, but they will need it. It will come to a point that they will need it. And, as a primary example, it's not easy. Even though when you get back to the workforce, it's still not easy. I am still not the primary income at home. And with that, I carry the stigma of people asking me some questions. And still, it's something that you have to develop for yourself. You have to have that communication with your partner, and you have to have something that you have to feel important. And if you don't feel important taking care of your kids at home, believe me, that's something that you have to reevaluate. And always have that flexible thing where if you want to go back to the workforce, do it. But you have to rely on the communication with your significant other.
Great, Sergio. And I think there's an onus on employers as well, such as where I work and the companies that, we all partner with, to really shift the frame of the linear career path, because that's not real for anybody anymore. Nobody works for IBM for 50 years anymore like they used to. So we really need to rethink the way we think of careers and skills. Leslie, Emma, which of the two of you wants to take that question next around equity?
Go ahead, Leslie.
Leslie, go for it.
Sure. Yeah, no. It's a great question. I love Sergio's answer also. There's a couple of things that come to mind. On one hand, we will not see a meaningful economic recovery without addressing this issue of equality in the workplace and the ability to support mothers and parents, right? Caregivers, frankly, in the workplace. Work has not been friendly for caregivers for a very long time. And I think the pandemic has only highlighted and inflamed what was a difficult situation. The 1 in 4 women who are thinking about leaving, when I see in my studies moms who are responding, and Emma's 100% right. It's moms who have the economic ability or privilege to be able to make that choice. So it's not all mothers, it's a contingent of mothers. But when I see it, they're saying things like, I'm putting my children, my husband and I are trying to work and keep our jobs. I'm putting my children on iPads and television for 10 hours a day to be able to do my work. I am unable to feed my children at the right times. I'm unable to support them in school because I'm trying to maintain my job. I spoke with a gentleman who does not have children recently, a reporter, and we were talking about this topic, and he said, I can see it. He said at the time, my boss is out on leave right now. He said, I'm having the best professional year that I've ever had. And she's had to take a leave of absence because her partner is a teacher and he had to go back to in person. So all of these things are really hurting the economy, in addition to hurting families and hurting individuals. I'll also add that we think a lot about the hands-on care of children and all that's required there, but a lot of my research previously and even in the current study, there's the mental load or the cognitive load associated with doing all the things that kids do, right? So if you are managing the household during the day, it's not just that you have to feed them meals and give them baths and make sure they're on their school Zooms or keep them entertained. You have to do all those things, as everyone on this panel well knows, and you have to plan days ahead, hours ahead for those meals. And you have to think about and anticipate what they need. And you have to fill out every school form and respond to the 15,000 emails from the school. And it's an overwhelming cognitive burden in addition to the hands-on work that really competes for the clarity and space that we need to ascend in leadership and ascend in many workplaces.
Yeah, so thank you for raising that, because it's not just the hard physical labor, it's the mental planning workload that is part of shared parenting too, particularly as kids grow older. I have a 10-year-old and a 15-year-old, so very different. It almost flips, like the cognitive workload increases the less the physical burden does. It never gets easier. Emma, your thoughts on this piece? I know you have many.
I have many thoughts. Well, first of all, what's very interesting to me is I'm very fascinated with our current parenting culture overall, and this assumption that the struggle is very real, and I don't want to diminish that at all, but there is also a lot of misunderstandings about the latest research about what kids need. So one of my favorite survey studies that I've ever come across, it was a meta study. So they looked at 34 different of the best quality studies ever. These female researchers, they were moms, and they were basically asking the question, how much time do kids need with their moms? Now, they just framed it gender neutral with their parents, but we all know we're talking about moms here, right? How much time do kids need with their moms? This is really the underlying question of all of this. And I thought those conclusions were so important. And that was that after age 2, it does not matter how much time parents spend with their children. That all of this high touch helicopter parenting is actually, it's not beneficial to kids. And it's actually the scientists suggested that it actually is probably hurting kids, because what happens is parents, now more men than women, are dropping out of the workforce. It's putting a huge economic challenge on families. This was before the pandemic. This study is like 5 years old. And that the stress of just financial struggles, if not poverty, are so detrimental to children and families and women and gender equality overall. So when we're talking about mental load, trust me, I get it. Like what you said about all of a sudden the kids are so intense because they're just so physically intense. And now my kids are 10 and 12 and they're very independent, but it's like all this mental stuff about, are they going to turn out to be sociopaths, and how do I stave that off? And so it is very struggled, but I think those are all really like very first world sort of existential crisis that a lot of us struggle with. So I think a lot of a favor we could do for ourselves, other from these expectations, be with our kids all the time, to encourage independence in our kids. Like my kids, I don't know how this happened, but they make their lunches every day. And they are on their Zooms by themselves all day long. So we're all home and I just work, and they're not little. And I try to thank my lucky stars for that every day, that they're not little anymore. But I think if we are freeing each other from this sort of like hyper mommy, hyper parent kind of culture, it's good for all of us. It's so good for everybody to be going and making these decisions about all parts of our families and our work and our own guilt and our own internal well-being from a place where we know the science is strong.
Yeah, great point. I mean, I think the hyper parenting, helicopter parenting, these are all kind of phenomena which, are uniquely American, but have been disseminated to the rest of the world. I mean, my husband's from the Netherlands, which is famous for a tradition of, you may have read in the New York Times, of dropping children to encourage independence in the woods. I find that a little bit extreme, and I don't advocate for that. My children, I've told them they will not be dropped in the woods. But we're in our final few minutes. I really want to leave our audience with some positive action items, ideas, thoughts to build on this conversation. So if we can please go around, and I'd like to urge each of you to take a few minutes to do two things for us. One, suggest one behavior change we as moms, dads, single parents, or even as single individuals with families can do that might help make this shared parenting movement move forward and take away good things beyond the COVID era. So one suggestion for our audience. Two, a great resource that you would recommend our audience refer to: book, video, blog, podcast, you name it. Could be one of your resources or aggregation of something you have on your sites too. So who wants to go first? Let's go with the kind of looking ahead. What can we do?
I'll jump in.
Okay.
Right. So I really find it very important to take the very long view of things. So when we are really looking at this, I mean, it's so hard to get through the day to day, right? And I know you want some tip on like time. People are like, give me your best time management tips. Like, there's nothing new I can say there. Like, the time management tips are out there. Go Google them. But I really want people to start thinking about the long view of things. Mm-hmm. So when we have gender equality in our homes, then we have men who are in positions of power, who are forced by choice or by guilt or by the law or by policy. But we have men in positions of power who are more likely to be making family-friendly policy. So we have men, as is today, and there's plenty of research, I'm sure you are familiar with it, Ripa, that is like the white bros in the C-suites tend to have stay-at-home, full-time stay-at-home moms. So like, they're like, sick, the kid's sick. Well, what's that have to do with my board meeting? What, like, well, who cares? Like, those two things are completely mutually exclusive from each other. Right. But if that's a dad, whether he's a married dad or a single dad, and he's like, no, I'm on the clock 50% of the time. So 50% of those kids puking at class, they have to come be rescued, have to be managed by a dad. And there's no way to change policy if people are not experiencing the pain firsthand. So it's really taking very much the long view of these things. And the second, so that is like the tip. And then the other, that practical thing is, so that's the policy change, but we have to have culture change that goes hand in hand with it. So when you're, let's say, I'll speak to the moms out there. I know the moms better than I know the dads. Call your girlfriend out when she's micromanaging her husband. Call your sister out when she's like picking a fight with her ex-husband about who's the better parent and who gets the kids more time. Call them out as like, why do you think that you have the upper hand in that situation? And the answer is probably because she's a woman. So it starts to shift the paradigm from women being the victim all the time to women actually having the upper hand in the domestic sphere often. And we will never have equality until we let that go. And the guys are never going to be our equal partners at home or with the childcare or in the workplace until we are equals at home. And I believe women are going to change that, move the needle. But we have to do it by supporting other women in a meaningful but firm way.
I love that. So have a little more agency. Let's stop self-victimizing. And, I'll say from my own perspective, stop being as much of a perfectionist because,
Yeah.
I
had this mom ask me, like, it was in a public forum with other women, professional, high-powered women. She's like, well, I'm going through divorce. Don't you think that I should get primary care because my ex-husband doesn't do a good job rinsing the dish detergent off the dishes?
Perfectionism, yes. So any resource for us, Emma, before I'm going to
Oh yeah, sorry.
Go to Leslie.
I'll tip my own stuff. Go to Wealthy Single Mommy and you can find all kinds of great resources there.
Great. Wonderful. I'll be sure to do that. All right, Leslie, over to you.
Sure. So I know a lot of leaders are part of this event and listening, so I'll really speak about it from the organizational side. Although I've been, working primarily with mothers and researching and writing about these topics, I also now work with employers. And on the employer side of things, what I've been advocating for, relentlessly is to really rethink what flexibility means at work, because it doesn't cost anything, right? I also advocate for things that do cost money, like helping to pay for childcare and elder care and increase mental health coverage, all of those things parents need right now. But flexibility, allowing not just people to work from home, because a lot of people are working from home, but really rethinking performance measures, really rethinking policies and practice around how long people have to be on, right? People can't be on Zooms all day if they're at home with their kids. People can't be on call for meetings, and people can't receive calls at 5 or 6 o'clock at night. Hey, can you just do this one more thing for me? Parents are burning out. They don't want to work at night anymore. They're exhausted. They're drained. They don't have the same schedules that they had before the pandemic because most don't have childcare. So I'm encouraging leaders and employers to really look at this flexibility and what they can do and how they can change the way they offer it in the workplace, because people will not ask for help. Most parents, at least the parents that are in my research and that I talk to, if they have the need for their income, and most do, they're terrified of losing their jobs. They are not going to tell you, oh, I'm sorry, I'm vulnerable. Things are really difficult at home. I'm losing my mind here. They just won't ask. So employers, I think, have to be proactive in supporting a more flexible workplace and really creating a family-friendly workplace under these extreme conditions.
Okay, thanks, Leslie. Any resource for us before I let Surya have the last word?
Sure. Well, I certainly encourage people to check out Mom's Hierarchy of Needs, but also the Better Life Lab. I think they do brilliant research on all things, including policy. To Emma's point, there's so much work that needs to happen at the government level that we have kind of conveniently ignored for decades. But that's part of the real answer to shifting things over the long term.
Thanks. And Sergio, last but not least, please share your final closing words.
Yes. Something I want to say to all the people watching us is you do not have to choose between being a good employee and a good parent. These things can go hand in hand. And, I was one. I didn't think it was possible. A couple of months ago, I joined thirdpath.org, Third Path Institute. You can find them at thirdpath.org. That's an excellent resource I'm just going to mention out there. Just because we need that support. Whether it's in the decision making, whether it's in the thought process, whether it's we are contemplating a career change, whether it's we're contemplating being a stay-at-home dad, we always need that support. Another thing that I wanted to say was I would like to see more of in this new year. It's collaboration within the mommy communities and the daddy communities. I think we need to have these conversations more often to make sure people understand it's a joint effort. If they're a single mother, we can talk about single fathers too and how they can be willing to collaborate and negotiate, even though it can be hard. But we need to be there for them and include in all of these support networks. One exercise that I would like all of you to do is see motherhood and fatherhood as a toolbox and decide, hey, if there's one very, very important tool that I would give to another mom or dad, what that tool would be. And just pick one and say to another mom or dad or coworker, here's this tool. This is the tool I'm going to lend to you. And once you figure out how to use it, just pay it forward. And that's an exercise I like to do within my own community and has been working out. Again, For resources, thirdpath.org. I think they're awesome. Their leader, Jessica DeGroot, has been around for 22 years. So even though when social media was not around, we were already working with this. And I think, it's going to be a great resource for parents and leaders as well.
Great. Thank you all. So we have some recommendations for organizations, for individuals, for us as communities. And so that really brings us to the end of the panel. Thank you so much, Sergio, Leslie, and Emma, for a fabulous discussion, thought-provoking for us to have equity both at home as well as at work. The two things drive each other. So thank you, everybody. Really enjoyed the conversation. This is Ripa Rashid signing off.